He was honest. He was true. He was straightforward. That's what people said about George Young. It was obvious to those who knew him, and many who didn't, that George Young was a man of vision, ingenuity, integrity, and purpose. In his high school graduation speech, he made a promise to himself and his family that he followed his entire life. This is what he said. "After all is said and done, and this life is closed, it will only be those who, in the language of another, has lived well, laughed often, loved much, who has gained the respect of intelligent people and left the world a better place than he found it, who will have achieved success." As the 20th century began, George's parents, Frances Donham, just 14, and Claude Young, only 18, were married and started their life together in the small farming community of Jeannette, Arkansas. They raised cotton, corn, and ran a small general store with a post office and a blacksmith shop. George was born at home, the first of 3 children. George once said, "Although we were poor, we never realized it because everyone in the county was poor." Growing up, George and his sisters attended a one-room schoolhouse. One teacher taught all grades, all subjects, which led to George going to high school at the age of 12. He graduated in 2 years because that was all of the high school they had. Having graduated high school at 14 and enrolled at Ouachita Baptist University in Arkadelphia, he saw an opportunity to support his already frugal student lifestyle by starting a laundry service for his fellow students. George understood the value of money, how to earn it, and how to save it. In 1924, George graduated from Ouachita Baptist at 18 with a Bachelor of Arts degree. George went to work within a week after graduating in 1924, and he's been working ever since. As a traveling salesman with the Davis Baking Powder Company, he called on stores throughout Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. It was on one of his sales trips to Wichita Falls where he met Fay Young at a dance at the Kemp Hotel where he was staying. The next year, George and Fay were married and made their home in Wichita Falls, followed by the birth of their son, George Cameron. In 1929, George was off on another adventure, joining Ozarka Water, based in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. 1929 also ushered in the Great Depression, putting millions out of work. Still with Ozarka, but struggling without an established territory, George began looking for other bottled water products he could sell. He found an opportunity with Crazy Water. Based in Mineral Wells and owned by Carr Collins, Crazy Water was doing great business, selling mineral water from their very own natural well. People came from all over to buy it, drink it, even bathe in it. Collins wanted to expand their market, but shipping bottled water around the country was costly. He came up with the idea of distilling the water to extract the minerals and just shipping the crystals in small packets. All the customer had to do was dissolve the crystals in tap water and receive the same benefits as Crazy Water.
Crazy crystals have been tried.
With Collins advertising on a radio program broadcast nationwide from his Crazy Water hotel lobby, the popularity of the crystals grew rapidly. George approached Collins about buying a Crazy Crystals franchise, but the only territory available was on the East Coast. George and Collins made the deal, so he packed up his family and moved to Washington, D.C. At the height of the Depression and the country out of work, Crazy Crystals did well. It was cheap and made people think they felt better. Unfortunately, the government began cracking down on patent medicines, and the popularity of Crazy Crystals made it an easy target. By the end of the 1930s, sales of Crazy Crystals had declined significantly. As sales continued to fall, George asked Collins to buy back the franchise. So once again, George and Collins made a deal. Carr Collins, who had become a mentor to George, suggested another company he thought George might be perfect for, Restland Memorial Park. In 1935, Restland was way beyond the city limits of Dallas. After George took over Restland, he put together an innovative slideshow to present to sales clubs, churches, and other organizations around Dallas. It was a busy time for George. He had only been in the funeral business for 6 years when it happened. December 7th, 1941. George chose to serve from home and operate Restland because he was already 36 years old when the U.S. entered the war. By 1946, George had been president of the Dallas Salesmanship Club, president of the Texas Cemetery Association, and president of the National Cemetery Association. He was gaining a national reputation for leadership. This is what he said. "I really felt good about things. Here I was, a young guy with everything going for me, kind of on a roll. And then that September, the accident occurred." George's son, George Cameron, was killed tragically in a car accident while on break from Princeton, about to return for his second year. He wasn't even 18 years old. George and Fay decided to take time off, to travel together, and work through their grief and determine how they could move forward as a couple. George said, "We just kind of fumbled around. We traveled for a year and a half. Mexico, Europe. We were grasping, searching. They discussed adoption, but were afraid they would be disqualified. George was 41, and Fay was 39. After encouragement from friends, they applied to Hope Cottage. A few months later, they received a call and got the good news they had been hoping for. A baby girl was waiting for them. Born just 2 years after George Cameron died, they brought their beautiful baby girl home and named her Carol Ann. Carol remembers her father enjoying his work because he felt he was helping people at a horrible point in their life. Although he may not have known the cemetery business when he started, George continued to grow Restland and acquired additional land as it became available. In 1955, he was the first to build a funeral home and crematorium connected to a cemetery in Texas, and he was the first to create a pre-need sales program. He recruited the best salesmen in other industries, and he built an ad campaign that is best remembered created around the line, "One call does all." George Young was a very likable, self-made entrepreneur with vision, guts, and fortitude, but he also wanted to give back to a city that had given him so much. He knew how to raise money and could get people to donate to anything. So he helped the Hope Cottage to create a foundation that would allow them to expand their financial base and support the organization that brought them so much joy. Throughout the years, George continued to be a well-known and highly respected local civic leader with several Dallas organizations. He was always pleased with what he could do for charities and his family, but was always a bit overwhelmed by his own wealth he had created. His ultimate gift to the Dallas community came in 1985, when George and Fay established the charitable trust known as the George and Fay Young Foundation to fund organizations operating in the Dallas and Fort Worth area. The focus would be specific areas of education, individual, family, and community intervention, animal awareness, and health. If alive today, he would be amazed at its existence and what it is doing. Living up to his high school commencement speech, George Young consistently gave the best he had. He continued to come to his office every day into his mid-80s. Every morning at 9, always in a 3-piece suit. He was an accomplished man. He was a generous man. He was a gift to those who lived in his time and were lucky enough to know him. Now that they are gone, George, along with Fay, are still enriching lives generations later through their foundation.